The power of language. Language is a powerful language constitutes of words, and how you construct those words into sentences and statements to make not only an impression, but to communicate your message to your audience. We have what we call phonology, which is the study of sounds of words. Phonemes are the sounds of words. Each word has a sound, and this sound, unless pronounced correctly with the right intention, may not communicate what really you intended to communicate with your audience. And that's why I felt that this time round, it's important for us to give you this nugget on the power of language. And so in language, we talk about choice of language and also chosen language. When we talk about choice of language, it's important to understand that when you have a presentation to make, you need to decide which language you're going to use, whether you're going to use English or you're going to use Swahili or your vernacular or foreign language that you're conversant with. Now, once one has the language of choice, one of the most challenging things which follows is the chosen language. Now, the chosen language entails what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. What is the structure of your language, and does your language have a flow? And this is where most people get challenged. Because yes, they may know what they really want to say, but then how do you structure it in such a manner that it makes sense to the people that you are communicating to? Let me tell you this. To communicate well, you need to use language appropriately and effectively. You need to use language appropriately and effectively. So the particular things that you need to watch and avoid. So avoid too many we call them filler words. Too much use of I mean. Actually, you know what I mean. Some people even go ahead to use words such as imagine after every sentence. Imagine. And or some people, I know someone who unconsciously uses the word after every statement. All these sounds and phrases have their meaning when used somehow in your communication. But when you overuse such statements and filler words, you detract your audience from what you really say. And so you find that filler words, when they're too much, they completely hinder you from communicating with your audience in an effective manner. So I want you to reflect. Do you have such a problem of and end up repeating a particular sentence or a particular word after a few seconds or a few minutes? So check on that and deal with that, because it can become an unbreakable habit that detracts from what you're really saying. It indicates a lack of confidence. It indicates a lack of confidence. And then you also want to check on your jargon. Watch on your jargon. The use of slang or any words which may not be understandable to your audience will alienate the listeners. So I know in this country we have slang language. One of it in Nairobi, we call it slang. And somehow, sometimes you find people unconsciously mixing proper use of language and slang language. Now, this will completely alienate your listener from you. Or sometimes we end up using hard vocabulary simply to impress people. Remember, when you're communicating, when you're speaking, you want to communicate a message or to persuade people of a particular endeavor. So therefore, you need to make sure that your language enables you to pass that message effectively. It is not just for the purposes of influencing people, impressing people with big words, but for the purposes of communication. So it's important for you to really be conscious of the language that you use. And if you end up using a jargon that you know may alienate the listener from what you're really talking about, then go ahead and explain, define what you are really saying. That way, then you are safe in your communication with your audience. And then also, you need to avoid what I call dogmatic expressions. So what are dogmatic expressions? Avoid prefacing statements of your opinions with phrases like "the fact is," or "the truth is," or "definitely," "we must do A, B, C, D." You know what? What you consider the truth may not be what others consider the truth. Or what you consider a fact may not be a fact to the people you're talking to. So you need to be very, organized in your communication. You need to be tactful. You need to be honest in your communication. Because what you think is the truth may appear like you are imposing your will. You're imposing your beliefs on people. So it's more tactful and honest to say, in my opinion, I firmly believe that. My view is. This does not only make you own what you're talking about to the audience, but at the same time presenting your views in a very humble way. So I'm sure some of you are asking yourself, Dan, what about if I'm quoting the Constitution or quoting a holy book, the Quran, the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita? Can't I say the truth is we must do A, B, C, D? This is what I'll submit to you. Even holy books are subject to interpretation. The Constitution is subject to interpretation. So you must be very careful not to be dogmatic or to sound dogmatic to your audience, like you are bulldozing them with your information and you want them to swallow your information just the way it is. Be tactful and honest in your communication. If I was in class, I would have asked any question until now. But because I'm doing this presentation, let me continue and then we will allow questions later. So I want to take you to another sphere of language and take you on a journey on particular things that most people make a lot of mistakes when they are also communicating. Richard C. Borden and HarperCollins wrote an article based on public speaking as listeners like it. So they did a research to find out, what do people feel as far as public speakers are concerned and their language? Are there particular statements and words that people find inaccurate or they find unnecessary, but at the same time speakers still use these particular words? And they highlighted a few things that speakers do use that are really unnecessary and inappropriate. So word works may be defined as any phrase or any group of words which is not an integral part of the thought you seek to express. And I want you to be very open-minded today. And you will realize how we make a lot of mistakes in the way we use language, especially when we are not conscious of what really we are communicating to the audience. When you are speaking, you are not in the business of carving statues out of marble, but you do something similar. You carve communication out of words. And WordWorks is instantly recognized and thoroughly dispersed by all listeners. So I'm going to give you only 3 examples of WordWorks. And I want to know from you whether you agree that these are some statements and words that people use that are necessary and inappropriate in their communication. Superlatives are works. Superlatives are works. Somebody stands to speak and they say, "This is true beyond any possible shadow of a doubt." I'm sure that statement sounds so flamboyant. This is true beyond any possible shadow of a doubt. But what did this person want to say? This person simply wanted to say, this is true. So if you want to strengthen the assertion that this is true, then do so by pouring concrete example to support it, rather than wax to fill the cracks. So if a statement is true and you want to emphasize, this is true, the reason why this is true is support it with examples, rather than telling us this is true beyond any possible shadow of a doubt, because it doesn't make it more true than it should be. And most people find themselves in stretching statements, stretching words to sound flamboyant with big words, but in real sense, they're not saying anything. They're just saying a simple thing, but they're trying to sound so big. Avoid superlatives. Let me take you to another example on what we call trite expressions. They are also works. Trite. Trite expressions, they are also works. You will see somebody standing to speak and they will say, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so glad to be here today. And then they will say a lot of words before eventually coming to say, let me begin by saying. You see, every time you stand before people and open your mouth, you have already begun speaking. So you need to be cognizant of that particular fact, that the moment you stand, you have already begun. And when you open your mouth, that's verbal beginning, and continue speaking. So somebody will come and say a lot of words and then now say, let me now begin by saying, you had already begun. So that becomes a trite expression. Or you speak and then you tell people, finally, as I come to an end, let me finish by saying, these are unnecessary words to your audience. Speech is an art. An art, most of the time, you need to find a creative way to commence your speech and a creative way to conclude your speech. You don't need to alert people that you are beginning if you're creative enough, and you don't need to alert people that you're completing or you're finishing your speech if you're creative enough. So you don't need to tell people, let me begin by saying, and you don't need to tell people, finally, as I come to an end. Just like a flight, when it's ascending, we can sense it's going up. And when it's descending, we know that this flight is going to land. Structure your speech in such a manner that when you commence, people know you have begun. And when you are landing or you are coming to an end, people can feel this speech is coming to an end. Ladies and gentlemen, I've shared with you 3 points. Point number 1, point number 2, point number 3. I believe that if all of us agree and begin to follow on this circle of strategy, we will indeed grow and become better. Thank you very much, and may God bless you. I didn't have to say, as I come to an end, finally, or in completing my speech, let me say, avoid such unnecessary trite expression in your delivery. Or somebody stands and as they commence their speech, they say, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed an honor and a privilege for me to be here. Sounds good, yes, but an honor is a privilege and a privilege is an honor. So why don't you choose one? It's an honor for me to be here. It's a privilege for me to be here. And go on with your speech. Or this common error of telling people, I would like to take a few minutes. Take them. You have already been given a few minutes. Take them. You don't need to tell people, I would like to take a few minutes. Just take the few minutes and let's see whether they are few or they are many. And this is a common error of each and every one of you. What's the problem with that statement? Each and every one of you. Each is everyone, and everyone is each. So avoid this repetition by saying each one of you or everyone. But you don't need to use both, each and every one of you, because you're simply repeating the same thing. The greatest culprits are actually people who use PowerPoint. Because most people who use PowerPoint You will find them, if they are not the ones in control of the slides, keep saying, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Let's go back. Let's move on. All these statements are what I call stealth phrases. When they assail the ears of your listener, a thumbs down reaction is instant. People feel there is a problem with your communication, even though they may not be able to put a finger on what exactly is wrong with your communication. So if you're using PowerPoint, be sure to be the one in control of the slides, or create a rapport with the person in control of the slides so that you give them a sign to keep moving the slides instead of you telling them, next slide, please. Let's move on. All these statements put together, they hinder you from effectively communicating with your audience. I'm sure you're saying, Coach Dan, today you're so hard. Yes, because if we treat speaking sacred, we're going to get sacred results. If we treat speaking casual, no wonder you find a lot of people receiving casual results. So it is important for us to really focus on growing ourselves to deliver effective messages. Another WordWorks or example of WordWorks is what I call the and so forth expression, and so forth expressions. When you're listing items in series, you need to stop cleanly with your last item. And so forth expression usually get interpreted as words calculated to make others believe you know more than you do. For example, somebody comes and says, Kenya has 45 ethnic groups: Kikuyus, Luos, Kalenjins, Luyas, and so forth and so on, etc., etc., and many, many others. When you're delivering a speech, avoid using the and so forth expression. Stop cleanly with your last item. Kenya has 45 ethnic groups. Examples: Kikuyus, Luos, Luyas, Kalenjin. Instead of saying etc., etc., and many, many others, it makes your speech unethical. And your use of language then becomes inappropriate here in the way you are fashioning your words and statements. So these are just a few examples of things that we do most of the time that we should avoid to enable us become effective whenever and wherever we have an opportunity to speak to an audience. But I'm sure then you're asking yourself, Dan, you've said we avoid this and we avoid this and we avoid that. Which language then should we use? Wait a minute. I'm going to give you some secret here on how to use language in the best way possible. And this is what I call language for emotional appeal. Language for emotional appeal. I'll tell you this, that there are many emotions you can trigger in the audience just by the choice of words in your public speaking. You can trigger happiness, anger, sadness, joy, nostalgia, reflection. Knowing your purpose for speaking to a group helps you to pick which emotions you want to tap. Now, when your purpose is known, choosing words to get the desired emotional response becomes much easier. Becomes much easier. So what you need to ask yourself is, what is my purpose for going on stage? Exactly what do I want to communicate to these people? And what kind of emotions do I want to tap into? That way then, it enables you to develop the kind of language for the kind of emotions that you want to tap into. And that becomes your language for emotional appeal. Every time you stand to speak, people ask themselves these questions: whether you know your subject, whether you care for them, and whether there is a reason why they should listen to you. When you have mastered the language for emotional appeal, it puts you on a rock pedestal to effectively communicate to people, dive into their minds and to their hearts, and draw them through the appeal to yourself, so that whatever word you say and whatever statement you say, it connects with them and they are able to follow you through, even as you influence them. I love the power of speaking when you have mastered words in the right way, because then you get to that level that you say a word or you say a statement and people are left thinking about it while you have moved forward to another statement and they want to catch up with you to get to understand what you're really talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe all of us can make an effort to develop our language, become better communicators, so that whenever we have an opportunity to speak, we can be effective. This is what we do at the Africa Center for Public Speaking. May God bless you, and thank you very much for listening. Coach Mills, back to you.
Oh, that was so rich. Thank you so much. Oh yeah, I'm already seeing they are applauding you. Oh gosh, that. Beatrice already is in the inbox. Beatrice already in the inbox. I'll just read her comment. She says, let me read. Beatrice Motike highlights her key takeaways, which are avoid fillers, avoid jargons or uncommon words, e.g. Sheng. Don't impose your belief, views, opinions, or thoughts as though they are facts. Avoid superlatives. Don't use synonyms together, e.g. each and every one of you. Don't use stale phrases, e.g. next slide please on the PowerPoint slides. Avoid using etc and so on at the end of your statement. Cleanly finish your statement language for emotional appeal, and then ask yourself what emotion you'd like to evoke in your audience. She's just summarized everything that we've put together. If we were awarding people, Beatrice, I would have awarded you. But so other than, thank you so much for sharing that, Rosalind, also. But at this juncture, I would want to open the Q&A segment. If you came in this session with a question that you feel was unanswered, or maybe from the session, there's a question, something was not clear, or you just want clarity on something, this is your moment. So we can do it in two ways. One, you can drop a question in the chat box, and two, you can put your hand up, I'll see you, and then I will point to you. I see Jay Murugi, your hand is up. Is that a question? If it's a question, you can unmute your mic and ask. Jay Murugi? Okay, maybe that was an error. Pamela in the inbox asks, kindly can I get summary of today's talk through my email? Luckily, we are recording the session, so we will send, if you signed up for the webinar and we have your email, we will send you a recording of today's session. So you can replay or you can share with people who you feel they should have been here or they should have learned something. Still the Q&A? Okay, you're welcome, Pamela. The Q&A segment is open if you have a question. Okay, do I take the silences? We are good. Okay, Henry, Mark Henry, your hand is up. You can unmute and ask.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you very much, Dan, for this opportunity and also giving us an oversight on this public speaking. But I have a question about body language. Does it matter really in the language and giving our speeches? The body language and the appearance.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, body language and the appearance matter a lot. Remember, one of the things I said, I think in one of the webinars was that whenever you are speaking, you need to ask yourself about the feelings that you are portraying through your speech. What feelings are you portraying? So that's where the body language comes in. In the science of communication, we say that 55% is physiological. That means 55% is your hand gestures, your facial expression, your eye contact, and your entire body language. 38% is your tonality. That is your tone variation, vocal projection, vocal charm accounts for 38%. Only 7% are the words that we speak. So what does that tell you? It's not really about the words. It is how we say them. And if we're going to say words effectively, then it's not just the language that we use, but at the same time, what accompanies that particular language, which involves our body language, our hand gestures, our facial expression, eye contact, and at the same time, the way we use our voice. But at the same time, again, you need to dress appropriately for the event that you're going to speak in. This is very important. We call this grooming, even though the focus should not be overemphasized on grooming until you forget that you actually need to focus on your message. Because I've seen people dress so smartly until they open their mouth. So never forget, even with your dressing and your grooming, that the focus should be on the message that you want to deliver to your audience. Hope that helps you, Mark.
Yes, thank you. Because I was trying to say that there is the language that you have spoken about, that's about pronunciation and grammar. And then I was trying to merge it together with the body language, because there's sometimes a person can stand to speak, but now whatever, it's like he doesn't have any information about the topic or about the event itself. You will definitely know that this person does not have any information concerning what he was about to speak through the body language. That's why I was trying to ask if it really matters, and you have answered my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you and welcome, Mark.
Okay. All right. Any other question? Okay. Helen is also asking for the summary. We will send the recording. Helen Sudori, Helen Sang, we will send the recording if you signed up for the webinar. Felicitas Mwenda asks, can anyone learn public speaking of whichever personality? Coach, you're on mute. Coach, you are on mute.
Sorry, I guess what Felicitas is asking is, can anyone learn public speaking regardless of their personality? If that's the case, then Felicitas, yes. And I've explained here before that people are of different personality, and most of the time we deem people that are extroverted to be great speakers. Those are sanguines and choleric. But you will be surprised that it's not necessarily so. People can be affected by different issues along the way in their lives. And even strong personalities can have a challenge when it comes to standing before an audience and express themselves. Sanguines will be very noisy when one-on-one, chatting and making people laugh. But the same sanguine, you take them on stage and you realize they are shy and they cannot express themselves effectively. And then you have the introverted personality that they're really not interested in going before the stage and communicating with people. They love the background and just doing their thing silently. And then all of a sudden they're thrown into leadership position, or an opportunity has happened and they need to communicate. Can they also develop themselves to become better communicators? Yes. Melancholies and phlegmatics can become great communicators through practice. They can become great communicators through organizing their thoughts and communicating their message effectively. In fact, it is said that some of the best speakers are actually introverted people. Why? Because they know they're not good in this. They take time to prepare very well. Regardless of your personality, all of us can learn how to stand before an audience and deliver a message effectively to the audience. You don't need to copy anybody. A choleric may be very energetic, maybe in the way they deliver their message, and so is a sanguine. A melancholy and a phleg can be reflective in the way they deliver their message. And that's okay. The most important thing is to deliver your message effectively. So I hope that helps you, Felicitas.
Okay. Yeah. We have some more questions. Summary, can anyone? Yeah. Irene asks, there are people, I think, who are loud while others are soft speakers. I know the audience can be lost when we have these different speakers based on their personality. Can one be trained to change their tone as per your audience?
I'm not sure whether I'm understanding that question, Coach Mills. Huh? There are people loud while others are soft speakers. I know the audience can be lost when we have these different speakers based on their personality. Can one be trained to change their tones as per your audience? All right. I think if I get you, you're talking more about the difference on how people communicate. That there are soft speakers and there are people who are loud naturally. And so the issue is, can people be trained on the aspect of tone variation? Yes, this is one of the emphasis that we do when you're learning about the voice. Because you can be loud, but you're monotonous. And you can be soft, but you're monotonous. So you can be soft, but you know how to vary your tone and use variable speed with your voice to communicate your message. So that's okay. The most important thing is, can you put some energy in your voice so that people are able to hear you and then vary your tone? Like I said, we are different. There are people who are loud and they're very energetic, and there are people who are soft and very reflective. The most important thing is, can you use the tools of communication to communicate your message effectively? And so through training, then sometimes people are able to understand their voice and be able to come to a place where they can now use their voice to communicate effectively. Remember, your voice is a mark of your personal culture, and it can become a commercial asset. And that's why there are people today who get paid for just using their voices. I know Coach Daniel has been here in one of the webinars, and Coach Daniel is a voice coach. And Coach Daniel, at the same time, his voice is used in many commercials around the world, doing adverts, and gets paid for that as a voiceover artist. So you can master the art of using your voice appropriately and in the best way possible to communicate your message. Yes, indeed, this can be trained to understand how to use your voice and to tap into the power of your voice to pass your message effectively. I've seen Eric, your hand has been up for a long time. Eric, maybe you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Coach Miles, for this really insightful session. What has really, mine isn't really a question, it is a comment that I have realized in the presentation that you have made, which is the essence of being mindful in using the language, to deliver a public speech. And by mindfulness, I mean the intentional investment of oneself in highlighting what structure of words to use to deliver a message in an audience. That has really struck me. And now what may probably be my question is this: does the sense of being intentional and being mindful in using language, public speaking, can it be trained as a matter of proficiency, because with my own personal experience, I have come to realize that it is out of a lack of or an insufficiency of not being too mindful with the words to use at a particular setting. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And I agree with you. It is all the essence of mindfulness when it comes to communication. And this is what I will say, you know, most people don't take communication very, very seriously. And when people come or enroll for our program, what we do tell them, we are in the business of serious communication because communication is key. And therefore, if communication is key and you want to communicate professionally, how then do you use language appropriately and effectively? That's what Erica said, mindfulness. What to say, when to say, how to say it is very, very key. But another thing that is very important is for us to understand that our culture, especially in Kenya, doesn't have a discipline of language. Somebody is using English, mixes it with Swahili, goes to the vernacular, comes back to English, and all this kind of culture affects the way we communicate professionally sometimes. We have the way we punch some particular words, or we have put some slang of particular words, and we use them unconsciously without us knowing we are not using words appropriately and effectively. It's very easy to find a Kenya, you know, communicating and jumping into a Swahili words, and he's speaking to an audience that doesn't understand Swahili, and then going into something else. So mindfulness is very key to understand how do I form a discipline of using language appropriately and effectively to communicate my message to my audience. So this is something that can be trained. At our center, what we do is we make you aware. And from today, you will realize when you're listening to speeches, you can pick word works. You can pick filler words. When there are too many, you can feel there is a problem there. Before that, maybe you never thought. You felt there was something wrong with this speech, but you never knew what exactly is wrong. Now you know it, and you can be able to pick. And if you are a slave of the same, then you can be conscious in swallowing your filler words and rectifying your word words so that you are able to communicate effectively. Believe me, even great and experienced speakers fall in this particular arena, finding themselves using filler words sometimes and using words inappropriately and also using word works. So it's something that can be trained through consciously and mindfulness to deliver your message effectively. Thank you.